equivalent of in our society. Very respected person. But then it's amazing to see also his humility, because this is this young guy, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, sannyasi, young sannyasi, comes to him and he said, I want to be your servant. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I want to be your servant. Very old, respected person says to a young person, I want to be your servant. It's very unlikely this would happen in our society. And because he was amazed by the features of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then they start to talk. And he feels he actually wants to help Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He says, you're a very young sannyasi. And for sannyasis, especially because you have to remember Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was initiated into Mayavadi order of sannyas, because Kesha Bharati was a Mayavadi. Because at that time you didn't have Vaishnava sannyas, you only had Mayavadis around. And there are different reasons why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas. Mainly it was for preaching. And then he felt, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya felt, as a sannyasi you need to know Vedanta, you need to have some knowledge. So I'll teach you Vedanta. And then they talk about Vedanta, and for first 7 days Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya speaks, and this is also amazing for me as a teacher, as somebody who did a lot of teaching in the past, that for 7 days Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya speaks, and he doesn't check with his student where his student is. He just speaks for 7 days, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very humbly doesn't say a thing, and after 1 week of study says, why do you understand what I'm trying to explain? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, yeah, actually I understand what Vedanta Sutra is all about, but your meaning, your expectation is just like clouds covering the sun. That's really confusing for me to see I cannot fathom your understanding. And he actually challenges Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And then they have a discussion. The discussion is a very philosophical discussion about the personalism and impersonalism. The Vedanta Sutra, what's actually the gist of the Vedanta Sutra is all commentators, or Vedanta Sutra is about Brahman. And Shankara and Vaishnava commentators, all of them agree that Brahman, that's the source of everything. That's the unity. Everything comes from Brahman. That's also our understanding. But how do you then explain individuality? So there is unity, but then there is distinction. How do you explain this? And all Vedanta commentators differ on this point. How do you account for difference? Shankara says difference is only on this conditioned level, but on the higher level there is a unity with Brahman. Vaishnavas have different opinion on this. So the discussion was about this. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is convinced and becomes a devotee, and then asks a very wise question. Asks him, okay, devotional service, that's the best process for me, but what's the most powerful way to perform bhakti, to be a devotee? What's the most powerful way? And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya explains, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quotes the verse from the famous verse from Brihad Naradiya Purana, that is
Harinam 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 Kevalam Kalo Nasteva 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 Katyanita.
And the meaning is that in this age of Kali there is no other way of achieving liberation but by chanting the holy names of God. And that's the best process. And these two verses come after this. And what I found, so this was just a summary of what was happening before. What I found very interesting now in the purport, how Prabhupada explains, now Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is very attracted, he becomes a devotee, and he writes in purport. The Bhattacharya was fully converted to the cult of Vaishnavism, and he was following the principles automatically, without being pressured. So this I want to focus on this sentence and kind of elaborate further on this sentence of the purport, where Prabhupada is saying that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was following the principles of bhakti automatically, without being pressured. So what's so big about this word? Because it implies something that is very intrinsic quality of bhakti, that to perform bhakti, you need to be free. Bhakti is free. And also the practitioner of bhakti needs to be free. What does it mean, free, or to be freedom? What does it mean in this context? I want to read an excellent purport by Srila Prabhupada in first canto, where he writes in chapter 6, verse 37, and you notice in almost every sentence Prabhupada speaks about the word freedom or free. He writes in the purport, every living being is anxious for full freedom because that is his transcendental nature. And this freedom is obtained only through the transcendental service of the Lord. Illusioned by the external energy, everyone thinks that he is free, but actually he is bound out by the laws of nature. A conditioned soul cannot freely move from one place to another, even on this earth, and what to speak of one planet to another. But the full-fledged free soul like Narada, always engaged in chanting the Lord's glory, is free to move not only on earth, but also in any part of the universe, as well as in any part of the spiritual sky. We can just imagine the extent and unlimitedness of his freedom, which is as good as that of the Supreme Lord. There is no reason or obligation for his traveling, and no one can stop him from his free movement. Similarly, the transcendental system of devotional service is also free. It may or may not develop in a particular person, even after he undergoes all the detailed formulas. Similarly, the association of devotees is also free. One may be fortunate to have it, or one may not have it even after thousands of endeavors. Therefore, in all spheres of devotional service, freedom is the main pivot. Without freedom, there is no execution of devotional service. The freedom surrendered to the Lord does not mean that the devotee becomes dependent in every aspect. To surrender unto the Lord, to the transparent medium of the spiritual master, is to attain complete freedom of life. So if you notice, Prabhupada mentions the word free or freedom in almost every sentence of this purport. And he writes, in all spheres of devotional service, freedom is the main pivot. Because in order to perform bhakti, remember the end of Bhagavad Gita. What does Krishna says to Arjuna? Okay, he says, surrender unto me. But before that, is it before or after? It's after, yeah. He says one very interesting thing. First he says him to surrender, and then he says, okay, now you have listened everything, now you can do whatever you want. Yat echasi tata kuru, yata ichasi. As you want, tata kuru. So may you do. So he gives him a full freedom to do actually what he wants. And this is when actually bhakti can appear, when one freely surrenders. That's a very logical thing. You cannot order somebody to love you. You want to get married, and then you come to a lady or a man, you want to get married, you're very interested. Will you marry me? The pistol. Will you marry me? This is not love. It sounds funny. It sounds funny, but in many ways we behave like this. We force each other to comply with us. We put ourselves in the center and we force other people to comply with us. Subtly. These things are very subtle. So